The Eli shell, incidentally, at 94 is quite a bit heavier than the Yale Varsity, which will soon show its prowess on the river against the Harvard Varsity.
Both crews rowing between 34 and 35, which is a high stroke with more than 2.5 miles to go.
There is somewhat of a difference in these two shells. The Crimson shell, the Crimson Junior Varsity, is using the German rigging, which puts number 5 man Charles Bolin and number 4 man Ed Porter both on the starboard or right side. While in the Eli shell, it's the normal Pocock rigging, and that puts Len Richards on the starboard side as the number 5 oar, and on the number 4 oar, Ed Noyes is on the port side. The bow in the Harvard shell is on the port side to the left, and on the Eli shell, Neil Robley at the bow oar is on the right or starboard side. So there is a difference in the riggings as they approach the first half mile of the downstream 3-mile junior varsity race. And once again, as in the freshman race, the two crews are having to contend with a very brisk headwind. It is not a record-type day. Harvard now approaching the first half mile marker. The Crimson going through. Here comes Yale. Through, and it's about 3 seconds, so less than a boat length between the two shells, with the Crimson out on top of the Elis.
Harvard is also under-stroking, George, by about a stroke or a stroke and a half per minute. It's the difference between 32 and 33 and a half.
As far as the records of these two crews are concerned, both the Harvard Junior Varsity and the Yale Junior Varsity have won 2 races. The Harvard Junior Varsity also won the Eastern Sprints in their heat. So they won the heat in the sprints, but did not win in the finals, being beaten by the Pennsylvania Junior Varsity. However, this is a very strong Harvard JV crew. The Elis, on the other hand, have won 2 and they lost 2. They were 3rd in the finals of the ECAC. In the final, Harvard finished with 6:06.9 tenths, and that is for the 2,000 meter distance. The Elis were 6:14.1, so there was a difference of approximately 8 seconds between the two shells, finishing 2nd and 3rd in the Eastern Sprint 1.25-mile race. Harvard was the victor. So, as we had in the freshman race, it's the second time the two shells have met, and we'll have the same situation in the final race of the day, the varsity 4-miler. About 3/4 of a mile have been rowed by the Crimson shell and the Eli shell, and it's the Crimson out in front, and now open water definitely separating the two shells.
Both crews are rowing the same stroke, both at 32 strokes a minute right now.
You can see at the catch, when the oar bites into the water, that it is a little bit difficult to row in this difficult headwind. Conditions, Bob, would you say they relatively smooth or a little bit on the choppy side?
I'd say the water is pretty good, George. The wind, as you've said, is adverse to any record time, but the water is the more important thing to the oarsmen.
Right now we have the Crimson heading toward the 1-mile marker, which will leave them 2 to go. Harvard going through now, and as they did, it looked like they went into a power 10. Here comes Yale going through, and now it's 6 seconds with Harvard leading by the 6, which would be a length and a half. So the Crimson has moved ahead by at least a length and a half.
And rowing 1 stroke lower, 32 to 33.
The coxswains calling about Will Lamb, the junior from Jamaica, New York, the coxswain for the Elis, while Dick Grossman, a senior, is the coxswain in the Harvard shell. Monk Terry is the Crimson stroke. Terry had moved up from a fine season last year with the Harvard lightweights and moved into the varsity heavyweight competition and earned himself the stroke seat in the Harvard JV shell. This, incidentally, is the same JV shell as far as the boatings are concerned that Harvard has used all season long. And there is trouble in the Eli shell, or at least there was for the moment. Looked like some water jumped over the gunnels there, but they have things under control now. For the moment, Water had poured for a second into the the stroke seat where Rennie Schoonmaker is digging it in for the Eli's. But now the Eli shell under control.
Yale rowing at 33.5, indicating they're trying to put the stroke up and get back this distance between the crews.
And right now, the Harvard shell with a very smooth stroke with the Ratzeburg or German rigging, putting the number 5 and 4 rowers on the same side of the shell, maintaining a good 2-length lead. We'll be coming to the 1.5 mile marker, which would be halfway through the 3-mile downstream course. And of course, as they approach the finish line, there will be the sounds of the spectator fleet greeting the winning crew and also honoring the losing crew. It's a tough race and a tough headwind on this day on the Thames River.
The water's smoothed out, George. Right around the last set of flags we went through is where it's likely to be the roughest. And as we can see right now, it's a good deal more smooth here than it was back half a mile.
Well, Bob, as a coxswain for Harvard a few years ago, not too many, who will determine in that Eli shell whether that stroke will be picked up? Will it be the coxswain, Will Lamb, or will it be Rennie Schoonmaker, the stroke?
That depends really, George, upon who has the more experience. Probably it'll be the stroke, but it might well be the coxswain under different circumstances.
Harvard going through the 1.5 miles now. And Yale approaching the 1.5 mile marker. The Eli's go through now, and it's a 7 seconds, so close to a 2-length lead. As it seems, the lead may have been a little longer than 2 lengths, and it looks like Yale maybe has cut just a wee bit into the Harvard lead.
As they both went through, George, Harvard was rowing 32 and Yale was rowing 34.
So halfway through the junior varsity race, and the Crimson with already 2 races, 2 victories in their boathouse, the combination and the freshmen going for a 3rd straight now, as they have a lead of a good 2 lengths over the Eli shell. And there is off to the left, possibly not in the view, would be the freshman crew of Harvard, a victorious crew, urging on their boys. And you can hear them actually yelling out, although you have to be in the right spot with this very heavy headwind that's coming right into the face of yours truly and Bob McLaughlin, and also these 2 fine shells. 1.5 miles has been rowed. Now it looks to be a little bit more than 1.5 miles. Looks to be about halfway to that next marker, which will be the 2-mile marker and will signify just 1 mile to go.
Howard has now put the stroke up to 33. Yale is also rowing higher, trying to get back the difference. Yale is rowing just under 35, and they appear to have cut the margin of difference a little bit, George, wouldn't you say?
It appears that Yale has closed the gap somewhat. We'll be able to tell a little bit better as we get to the 2-mile marker, which will indicate just 1 mile to go in the downstream 3-miler, the junior varsity race between Yale and Harvard on Regatta Day.
With over a mile to go and both crews rowing at 34 to 35, it shows the difference in technique from what we used to see 10 years ago. 10 years ago, they would have been 2 or 3 strokes lower, I would guess, at about this time.
It appears with this headwind that we are facing that both coxswains will certainly try and keep an eye on anyone in trouble, because the wind is blowing strong as they approach the 2-mile marker.
Yale is at 34.5.
Okay, well, Harvard going through now. Let's check Yale, and it is definitely a little bit closer for Yale as they go through, and now it's 6 seconds, so it is less than 2 lengths, and Yale is making a desperate bid, Bob, to catch this Crimson crew.
Well, this is their last chance, the last mile. Harvard went through at 34, and Yale at 33.5. The stroke has slipped down a point or 2 for Yale.
We can see Big Frank Watson in the number 6 seat for the Eli's. He rowed for 2 years in the Eli varsity, but lost a seat this year for the big race, the varsity race, but he's doing his best to give the Eli's something to shout about in the JV race. Looks to me, Bob, like Harvard now has increased that lead. They have apparently met the challenge of the Eli's and met it successfully.
Yeah, I would say they have about a length of open water right now, George, or 2 lengths total lead.
They have less now than a mile to go as the spectator fleet begins to hover into view. The Crimson Shell, coxswained by Dick Grossman, a senior, stroked by Monk Terry, Mike Livingston in the bow seat, whose brother Cleve Livingston will be rowing in the varsity race. Charlie Hamlin, Bob Goldcamp, Ed Porter, Charlie Bolin, Pete Rogers, and Sam Talbot. Those are the boys in the Crimson Shell, which right now has a good 2-length lead.
Both crews right now are rowing about 33 strokes a minute, and here's where you would really expect to see Yale go up.
Well, it will be up to Will Lamb, the coxswain, and Rennie Schoonmaker, a seasoned veteran in that stroke seat out of Poughkeepsie, New York, a senior, to get that Eli Shell moving at a stronger clip, because they've got some work to do. They've got some distance to make up. They are now back about 2 lengths to the Crimson Shell. There was just one instance of trouble in the Eli Shell, where Schoonmaker appeared to take some water in, but they quickly recovered.